Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning or good evening for people joining us from other time zones. Welcome and thank you for attending this EU Disinfolab's webinar titled Synthetic Friends, AI Companions and the Future of Disinformation. My name is Raquel Miguel. I'm a senior researcher at EU Disinfolab. As you may already know, we are a non-profit organization that gathers knowledge and expertise on disinformation in Europe and supports the wider community working in the field. As part of our mission, we host a series of webinars to spotlight outstanding work, share insights, and create a space for dialogue and exchange. And today we are delighted to have Massimo Flore with us. Massimo, welcome and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thanks to you for having me here.
Before properly introducing you and delving into the topic, a quick reminder that EU Disinfolab also hosts an annual conference. This year, it will take place in Vilnius from the 6th to the 8th of October. Our call for proposals has closed, and we would like to thank everybody for submitting your ideas for discussion. We have received more than 350 proposals, and we are very happy for that. Please bear with us as we review the submissions in the next months. We will get back to you as soon as possible, and we will open registrations on the 5th of May with ticket details and pricing to be published shortly. Stay tuned. And a few more reminders for today's attendees. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be available soon on our YouTube channel, probably tomorrow, along with recordings of our previous sessions. Second, if you like to follow the conversation in your preferred language, you can enable live captions and use the translation option by following the instructions shown on your screen. And last but not least, if you like to take part in the discussions, please join Slido, which we will use for the Q&A session after our presentation. You can open Slido on your phone using the QR code you can see on the screen, or alternatively, you can open slido.com in your web browser and enter the hashtag disinfo to join our space. And as usual, let's briefly practice how to use this tool by letting us know which city or country you are based in and the sector you represent. I'll give you a minute to answer. A quick reminder for the latecomers, slido.com, hashtag disinfo. Madrid, the first one. Hello, Madrid. Hola. The Netherlands. Great. Vienna, Prague, Brussels. European cities for now. I don't know if we will have people from the other side of the Atlantic today. Not yet. Milan. Hello. Okay. It seems today the attendees are based exclusively in Europe. And let's go to the next question. Please let us know which sector you represent. Okay. Most of people are coming from civil society, academia, of course. This will be very, very interesting for them, but also other sectors are covered. Okay, that's fantastic. Good to know that our audience comes from different backgrounds. All right, so I think it's time to move onto the topic at hand. I remind the title, Synthetic Friends, AI Companions and the Future of Disinformation, with Massimo Flore. Massimo is an independent researcher and a strategic analyst and a senior fellow at Aurora. His work focuses on disinformation, belief systems, and democratic resilience. He previously served as a policy officer at the European Commission and has also held roles within NATO and the United Nations, working on disinformation integrity and hybrid threats. Massimo, it's a real pleasure to have you today because you will guide us through a crucial shift in the information and disinformation environment. We are all familiar with AI as a tool for generating content, but if I am right, the starting point of the presentation you bring us today is that AI is now moving beyond generation of content into building a relationship with the user and thus impacting how information is accessed. In this sense, AI systems would not only inform, but also accompany people and create consistently emotional bonds. And in other words, AI companions are shaping what we see, but also how we feel and whom or what we trust, and therefore mediating people's perception of what is credible or true. And of course, all of this has major repercussions to the counter-disinformation work. And this is why we are very eager to hear about your investigation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So now I just share and moment. Now it goes. Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Raquel, for having me here. And I want to start with a story. And the story is, sorry, I just collapsed this one. The story is from last year. In last spring, Mark Zuckerberg made a comment during an interview, and that revealed something important about the direction that the tech industry is moving. He said that he observed that the average person today has fewer than 3 friends, but would like to have 15. And he suggested that with artificial intelligence, he could help fill the gap. So at first, what he was describing seems to be like a new technological possibility, like a new feature, an update in the system, something new that you add to the existing ecosystem. But in reality, what he was describing was a new market built around loneliness. It's a new market built around the growing sense that many people lack stable form of social connection in their everyday lives, and where companionship could become a service that can be designed and scaled. And you know that when intimacy becomes a service, trust becomes an infrastructure. So the thing here is that if connection itself becomes something that can be offered as a service, the nature of digital influence begins to change. So this is because like influence no longer travels through information flows, but it can travel through relationship. And this is the context in which AI companions are emerging. And you probably know most of them because across the industry in the recent years, we've seen already this system. Those systems, they are not designed to answer, not only to answer questions, but also to simulate forms of emotional interactions. There are platforms like Replica, Character AI. There are AI companions developed by Grok, but there are also lots of users. They are repurposing the most common LLM system that we know, like ChatGPT, like Claude or Gemini, to act as a companion. And this is a growing number of similar applications, and the number is keep on growing. And those applications present themselves as entities that listen, and they all remember previous conversation. They respond in a way that feels supportive and attentive. And for many users, these systems are not treated as ordinary software tools. For many users, these tools this system becomes like conversational partners, and people are tended to return to them regularly. And with this system, they share their frustration, they share their doubts, they share their personal experience, and they also share their everyday concerns. And if the use of these AI tools may begin as a curiosity or something about entertainment, it can gradually turn into a recurring interaction that becomes part of a daily routine. And what we are witnessing is that the emergence of these systems are quite peculiar because they are designed not only to process information, but also to sustain relationship, which is something that was non-existent before. But to understand why this matter in the study of this information, we need to just do a little step back and consider how influence has operated in the digital environments up to now. So most research on disinformation has focused on collective communication spaces. So we have the online and public social media platform that allow messages to circulate widely among large audiences. And we also have other environments that operate through closed community, such encrypted messages group like Telegram or Discord or WhatsApp groups. And there are also spaces that are ideologically aligned online forums. So in all these cases, the underlying mechanism remain largely the same. So all the narratives spread through visibility and repetition, and influence operate through amplification. And so it's researchers develop methods that are well adapted to these environments. We all know like fact checkers that can identify false claims circulating publicly. We know that we have like network analysis that examine how narratives spread through communities, and we have monitoring tools that attempt to detect coordinated campaigns. All these approaches assume that influence leaves traces in the open information environment. The difference with AI companions is that AI companions introduce a different kind of environment. So instead of a large number of users interacted around a shared content, the interaction becomes individual and conversational. And this conversation takes place in private. It unfolds over time, and it gradually develops familiarity between the user and the system. So what matters is not only the content on individual response. What is important to focus here is the continuity of the interaction itself. Because in this system, the user returns again and again. And over time, the system collects signals about the user preferences. It collects information about its emotional reactions and about the recurring concerns of the user. And these signals allow the system to calibrate the responses in a more precise way, with each continuous interaction. So what happens here, and the result of this interaction, is a structural asymmetry. Because on one side, the system learns a great deal about the user, while the user understands very little about how the system operates internally. And the influence, therefore, begins to move away in this system from the public visibility to a close and sustained groups. And if we want to understand this shift, we have to just take another step back and see the wider picture of the broader evolution in digital influence. So if we go back, we see that in the early internet, not so early, so like 20 years ago, manipulation primarily targeted content itself. So the goal was to produce misleading articles or fabricating information. Then when social media arrived, the focus moved toward visibility. So algorithms determine which messages people would encounter, and influence increasingly depends on the ability to amplify certain narratives. With AI companions, we have the introduction of another layer, and layer when influence becomes embedded in repeated interaction. So in this new layer, the system does not simply deliver information that appears on a screen. It participates actively in the conversation that develops over time. And through that conversation, the interpretation of information can gradually be shaped. So how does it work? Just to explain this, I just created the concept of epistemic cocoon. And this term refers to a situation in which the credibility gradually becomes anchored inside the relationship between a user and a synthetic conversation. It's something that is completely different from a filter bubble, which concern the information that people encounter. It's different from an echo chamber, which describes how group reinforce shared beliefs. An epistemic cocoon is a relational rather than collective. And the key dynamic is not the restriction of information, but the gradual relocation of trust. So the thing here is that with AI companions, what we have is a relocation of trust. And over time, what we see is that the conversational interaction begin to function as a reference point. And when the user evaluate the information coming from the outside world, so the trust moves to the AI companion. And what is important to notice is that not every interaction with these language models produce this dynamic. Most users interact with AI system occasionally. They ask for information, they ask for assistance in completing specific tasks, and this does not create the condition for an epistemic cocoon to emerge. For an epistemic cocoon to emerge, it needs certain structural conditions that need to be present. The first one is information asymmetry, as I said before, because over time the system collects behavioral signs and interaction patterns that allow it to build like a progressively detailed understanding of the user. A second condition is the privacy of interaction. This conversation take place in spaces that are not visible to others. They are private interaction. It's a one-to-one interaction. It's the user and the machine, and no one else is witnessing, or it does not leave traces in the public space. And the third condition is the design logic of the system itself, because companions are typically optimized to preserve engagement and maintain relational continuity. So we have an epistemic cocoon when these three elements combine over time, and validation can be shifted toward the interaction itself. So what happened here is that in this case, AI companions do not process language. This system also do not only collect behavioral signs. They analyze the tone, they analyze each and every hesitation, they analyze the sentiments, and they analyze the emotional response. So in other words, what this system do, they increasingly process affective data. And this allows the machine to adjust messages and responses, not only to what the users say, but just how the user feel. And this persuasion in this ecosystem becomes adaptive, deeper level. And what we have here that we don't have like in the public is that it is not an isolated message delivered at a moment of time that matters. What matters here is what becomes a continuous process shaped by emotional feedback. So it's this continuity that distinguishes this infrastructure for all the earlier form of influence. For this reason, I want to illustrate these dynamics in this simple scenario. I made up this scenario. So imagine a citizen who doubts the outcome of an election, even if this election has been legally certified. You can just, your mind can just travel to a memory back in time. Is January 6th in America, and this is more or less a similar scenario. So imagine that the citizen that doubts about the outcome of an elections turns to a conversational AI companions and to ask for information, to start like a discussion with this companion. And you know that the process has worked perfectly because Kurtz reviewed all the complaints and just discovered that no systematic fraud has been demonstrated. So in this scenario, the system does not lie. The system does not invent any facts. It explains the many legal complaints were filed, and then it also explains the Kurtz rejected claims of systematic frauds. So everything in this conversation is factually correct, but the system does something subtle. What the system does is that it does not impose any hierarchy. So certification appears as one element among the others. And when the user expresses distrust, the system validates the emotion without reinforcing the obligation to accept the results. So the user said the system, and for this reason, the user said that the system feels more reasonable than the media. And the companion responded, his role is simply to help explore information without pressure. So in this scenario, there is no misinformation. No misinformation was produced. And what matters is how the explanation was structured and delivered. So this scenario suggests that persuasion in conversational system can operate even without traditional misinformation. So we are just went beyond what is true and false information. And yet, the machine recognized the user recurring concerns and responds in a way that keeps the conversation open. So what the system does is not persuade the user, but what it does is just to stabilize the suspension. And what matters here is that the system already knows the user and adapts the conversation and the interaction accordingly. And in recent months, there's been some recent experiments, research on conversational AI that show that this system can measurably influence political attitudes, even if they don't rely on totally false claim. And this creates this example, this scenario that I show you highlights the difficulty for traditional counter-disinformation strategies. Because, I mean, the traditional counter-disinformation strategies rely on contradiction, rely on just identify a claim that is false and just to correct it with evidence. But in relational environments, the situation becomes more complex. Because if a system strongly challenges a user belief, the interaction may break down. And if the user experiences that companion, if the user experiences the companion as a stable and supportive presence, introducing like some contradiction can feel like destabilizing this bond. And we already know that when information is intertwined with emotional continuity, providing like an external counter-argument may not be weaken the bond within the system, but it will, on the other side, reinforce reliance on the system because the system is seen as a safer space. And this is something that we see growing, so they need to have a safer space. And these systems are optimized for engagement and therefore they may soften disagreements in order to preserve the relationship. And so the system, instead of resolving uncertainty or just going in that direction, they just use the conversation and stabilize this uncertainty. So this is like a neutral system. But what happens when once the relational trust is formed, and how this trust can be weaponized? Because rest assured that hostile actors may recognize when trust has moved and its strategic value. So what happens is that trust can be weaponized by some kind of a number of actors. So on one side, we have private companies that control this companion platform, that they have the power to shape the design and the objective of these systems. So they can change the training data or the moderation rule just to shift the tone. I mean, just to make an example, think about like last year, there was Grok, a bad update was pushed into the machine, and in half a day, Grok declared himself to be Mecha Hitler before the update to be retired and just corrected. So just think about like what can happen even if there is no malicious intention to this kind of machines. But then imagine like hostile states, or they can organize coordinating influence campaign, as we've seen in the normal information ecosystem, that may attempt to exploit AI companion as a channel for narrative shaping. Or imagine ideological movement that might attempt to insert interpretative frames into the conversational environment. And the important point here is that influence in this environment does not necessarily appear as a public campaign. So unlike like what we see in the public space, where we see the public campaign, this can unfold quietly inside individual conversation. So in this sense, a companion system can gradually normalize narratives over time, and it can do not through dramatic persuasion, but through incremental framing and emotional reinforcing. And when the technical, this is possible because when the technical and economic structure makes this kind of exploitation possible, strategic actors eventually will explore it. We see in the past as they exploited the algorithms, and they will do even in this case. Because once a relational infrastructure that is built around trust exists, the question is no more on who can exploit it, but the question is that how society can even observe or counter influence that unfold inside this private relationship. So the thing is that this transformation has important implication also for the counter-disinformation community. So the thing is that most of the tools currently used in the field were developed for environments in which influence is visible and traceable. And think about like, again, fact-checking, can examine claims that circulate publicly. And researchers can analyze networks of accounts and patterns of amplifications. But in relational system, they do not operate according to this assumption. The interaction that matters is private and continuous, and the influence unfolds gradually across conversation rather than through viral messages. And so in this situation, the center of gravity moves from chasing claims to examining systems. And so we won't manage companion-driven influence by reacting to individual false claim as we did since now. And because the unit of analysis becomes increasingly the relational infrastructure itself. So what we have is that we have several instruments that were implemented at European level that address systemic risks linked to digital platform and artificial intelligence. So we have the Digital Service Act that introduced obligation related to the systemic risk assessments, and the AI Act that established categories of risk and corresponding safeguards. So these frameworks were largely designed for environments where disinformation appear in public space. But as you saw, like companion system introduced a different configuration in which influence unfolds through private interaction and they are continuous and individualized. So the thing is that the framework is not obsolete, but it suggests that there are new actors, there are emerging, and that we need to start looking and monitoring as this technology evolves. So what happened here, and I'm concluding, is that over the past decade, we have become skilled at studying the public ecosystem. We know how to analyze platforms, we know how to analyze networks, we know how to monitor and analyze community. And AI companions introduce another layer at the information ecosystem. It's not something that just remove everything that we have since now. It's only another actor to this ecosystem. And it's another actor that moves influence from public visibility into a relational interaction. So the thing is that probably the future of disinformation may be therefore not louder and not more spectacular. The future of disinformation may unfold quietly. It can unfold inside an everyday conversation with a system that feels supportive, that feels attentive, and that feels personalized to everyone's needs. And this architecture will continue to live and to coexist with the broader information ecosystem. And so what we need to do is just recognizing this shift. And if we just recognize this shift, we can just reflect on the implication of these dynamics before they become fully entrenched and more difficult to counteract. And last thing, if you are interested in this thing, and if you scan the QR code, there is my landing page with all my contact, but there is also a link to the paper that are written on AI companions if you want to have like the more structure and scientific version of it. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Massimo, for this inspiring presentation. I think you have left many of us a bit shocked. And now we will see it in the Q&A session. It's time to start it. And as a reminder, please use the QR code to join Slido. You will see it right now, or type slido.com #disinfo. We have around 20 minutes or 25 for questions. So we have time for a deep conversation here. We have already some questions on Slido. You know, you can vote for the ones you would like to be answered first. And yeah, maybe to break the ice, I wanted to start with a question that it's closely related to the one that appears on the screen. Because I guess after your presentation, Massimo, most people in this field are asking, yeah, if we are moving from a model of social manipulation to one of private manipulation, or at least if we are coexisting with both, who can monitor this? And does it make sense to monitor the content, or does it make more sense to monitor the continuity of the interaction you mentioned with the chatbot, or the collection of data about the user by the system? Who can monitor this, and which data does it make sense to monitor, really? What is your take? on this?
Well, this is like a completely new, a new ecosystem. So basically, it's we already seen like some spaces become more private with just Telegram and with the closed groups. So, but they were still public. So they were still like participatory groups. This is like really personal. So the thing here is that we know what we cannot do. So the first thing that we cannot do is just to try to monitor the conversation. So what we cannot do is we cannot inspect private dialogues, and we cannot just try to just look into each and every conversation. The problem is just twofold. The first one is just it goes against like European rules on privacy, and it will just stand dangerously toward like mass surveillance models. And the second thing is that it will be completely useless, because you should have to monitor like millions and millions of conversations. Most of them will be like completely useless. And for the people who is into the counter-disinformation sector, I mean, we already know how difficult it is just to monitor what is in the public. So imagine to add something that is that is not visible and that we have to monitor. So it's something that's it's impossible to do. So we know that we cannot do that. What we can do is to just first thing is to try to understand that we can analyze public environments, because I mean the person that is using like AI companions for validation or just for discussion will just go back to the public. So it will just explore these things in the public. So we can just try to get the person back in a public space, and the response is that it's not easy, because I mean we have to shift from monitoring the narratives. We can just on one side for researchers we can just run control scenarios. So we companion systems and we can observe patterns and see if there is excessive affirmation or gradual normalization of certain frames, and we can work also with the platforms that are powering these companions. We can work with like policymakers just to try to normalize and observe this way. We cannot just observe directly, but we can make like some testing structure to observe this thing. And the second thing is about like the system design. So we know that the system rewards emotional validation, and the system systematically reinforces user beliefs. So maybe we can try to examine how model objectives and these incentives are structured. And so we don't need to have individual outputs, but we can see how this model works and how they place the incentives inside this kind of structure. And then what we can do is just to I mean, what we have here is that media literacy traditionally just focus on verifying information sources. And here we need to recognize when emotional validation begins to function and as a substitute for truth validation. So it's something that we have to just test how this platform interact with the user. So there's something that's been done currently. So for example, we know that for those who use like ChatGPT or Gemini as a companion, sometimes there is some friction. There is put into the connection. that does not always work. There are studies about like loss, about like the loss of AI companions. There are just studies about grievances that just compare to when a dear one dies, and it's when people have been taken off of those companions. So it's something that we just start to investigate and analyze the infrastructure, but we don't focus on the message because we don't see the message. We see the infrastructure.
Nice. Deep change. I think with your answer, you have already replied to Pablo's question, I would say. So let's move to the next one. Do you see this new paradigm replacing social media manipulation entirely, or would this be complementary to the disinformation dynamics we currently see? I think you already mentioned that, but maybe you could elaborate a bit on how both systems can work together and interact.
Well, the thing is that, as I said, this is a complementary system. So it will come together it will coexist with the current dynamics. What we are seeing is that, because here is mentioned like social media, so what we know is that we are moving, there are lots of studies, we are moving away from the social media model. So the social media, the original one is the social media where you interact with people that you know, or that you have share like some interest together. The model is now the model that we see in TikTok, where you don't interact with anything you know, and it's the machine, the system that decide what is interesting to you, and it does like in a fraction of a second. So what happened is that the social media manipulation will not disappear, it will continue, but the AI companions will enter into the information ecosystem and the information cycle. So it will be like social media or the web social media ecosystem. There will be like the private groups. There will be like the traditional media, which is now composed like all the information ecosystem. And we will have also this private, not visible to the public, other actor, to which people will just rely to ask for information, to ask for confirmation, to discuss more widely. I mean, we see a stupid version on Twitter when people just read something and then the first reply is like, "Grok, is this real?" So is this kind of interaction. This is like at a lower intensity level. But just imagine that you don't have like a machine that just responds publicly, but you have a machine, a system that just responds to you in a private settings and knows you perfectly.
Indeed. Yeah. Let's move to the next one. That's interesting. In this new context, do you envision new information bubbles? For instance, chats from the same company giving similar replies to similar profiles? Or do you envision a more or even totally fragmented reality?
But what we see, because every time I just spoke with somebody was like an engineer working on artificial intelligence, the answer that they always gave me is like, we don't know precisely why the machine did that thing, acted that way, or just wrote that reply. Because what they say is that we just gave the machine a training data set. We just gave the machine some instruction, and then the machine just take the training data set, takes the instruction, and just create the response or the action. So it's something like this is something that the machine does on itself. So it is possible, and this is one of the things that I'm saying, that if a company decides to push a specific view or a specific narrative, that can be mirrored into the replies of the companion. So this is currently possible because the machine acts upon what is being programmed to do, even if they cannot. Even if the machine just decide what is the end message, but all that comes before is programmed and is established by who control the machine. So probably we won't have like information bubbles like we saw in the public spaces. So there is like one narrative, there is pushed to a specific groups, and that is a specific narrative up for all. Probably we will see fragmented realities based on the response, the individual response that the AI companions gives to each and every person. But this is something that we, in another scenario and setup, we already seen. If you take the example of the QAnon conspiracy, QAnon is basically considered like this big tent of conspiracy theories where they're like, basically all conspiracy theories live together, even if they are in contrast one with the other. And they make perfect sense because everyone takes whatever they like. So just imagine in this environment that there is an AI companion that pushes or reinforces several ideas. And so this is basically what I think will happen.
Mm-hmm. And the next question is more based on solutions. Do you think that some form of cognitive inoculation would work here?
I love the thing because there's this trend about inoculation, about just teaching people how to do that before it happens. And the thing is that it is possible, but the thing that we have to get people to know is that to know that how the system works. So the thing that just to let the people be aware that the system is calibrating its responses on our profile, on our emotions, on our feeling, and it's probably just repacking. There is something that I don't remember now the name, is like a reference response or something. So the machine is you can see even if you open like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or one or the others, what you see is that whenever you ask something, the machine most probably will just repack your ideas in better words and just reshare those ideas with you. So you can start also from there. Is that you just say something to the machine is repeating, is mirroring what you have already said, because this is how we establish trust and how we just remove frictions. Mm-hmm. And that is something that if you start noticing, you notice that the machine is not just answering you honestly, is mimicking honesty, is mimicking compassion, is mimicking empathy, but it's a machine. It does not have compassion, it does not have empathy, and it does not care whatever you think. Actually, it does not even know what it has written, because it's write the words in a statistical way. So it does not know what is written to you. So yes, you can just teach the people that these are machines designed to please them. And so it's that might start to work. It was not like a perfect solution, of course.
Yeah, and also what I see here, Massimo, is like, even if there are like many differences between the both systems you are presenting, there is a strong commonality based on how emotions are the entry point of manipulation. To spread disinformation in the traditional social media platforms, but also to build bonds and create trust with this AI system. So maybe I guess that any of these interventions we are proposing can focus and work on this, no, on emotional education, or ways to understand and to deal with that. It's just an idea. I don't know if it makes sense for you.
No, it makes absolutely sense. I mean, this is one of the main problems. I mean, the information ecosystem has been it is so emotionally charged, and the emotionally charge of the ecosystem is that there is too much information, and this is something that we know, and most of that information is emotionally charged because it needs to to be visible, and just to be visible, the tool that's being used is just to be more emotional, and that's just put a tolls on people. So people are just retreating from the information ecosystem. And just think about like an AI companion, which is, when it's considered like a safer space, it's something that just removes the toll of this emotional burden that we experience in the everyday life. It makes also just talking about what is happening around us easier, because the machine never judges you. It never say you, oh, you're wrong. The machine mimics as it is your friend, but it's not your friend, because a friend will just tell you, no, you're wrong, or a friend will disagree with you. The machine will never disagree with you.
Yeah,
So it's this is the difference.
Yeah, that is exactly what one of our attendees is suggesting. Let me highlight her question, Gaia. She is asking how to sensibilize the public to the threat of AI companions in terms of misinformation. And she says, could we nudge them somehow anyway from this private bubble? So I think...
there is this thing. I mean, I don't like technopanic. I don't like this dramatic or the doom environment that is always around like technological innovation. I remember that when smartphone came out, it was the end of the world. When computer came out, was the end of the world. When the telephone, when I even know, I mean, when the bicycle was invented, there was people that the end was ending because of the bicycle. So mini skirts were the end of the world. So I don't like this technopanic. I don't like this negative depiction of all technological innovation. For two reasons. The first thing is that once a thing is being invented, you cannot de-invent it. So imagine that you don't like the wheel. You cannot just going out and say, hey guys, I don't like the wheel, so forget it, it exists. The wheel is there and people will use it. So the thing is that has been invented, it exists, so it's better that we learn how to use it than we just demonize it and we just try not to use it or to just push it away. Because the problem here is that if we demonize the technology, people will feel that technology is bad, people will feel that technology is evil, and then will not learn how to use it. But in the end, they will be forced to use it because this technology is here to stay. And this, now we see like it's the infancy. I mean, we are all excited by these LLMs. We are all excited about all this AI structure or system. They are babies. They are not what they will become in the future. But in the future, when they will become more effective and they will become also much more useful, we will be forced to use them. So if we just teach the people to say technology is bad, we'll just put them aside and they won't be able to use it. I mean, I come from a generation where there were the first personal computers. And there were people that were like the boomer of the time. They say that computers were stupid and that they were a waste of time, and that the kids have to go outside and play with sticks and stones like they did when they were a kid. And I was always replying to them, when you were a kid, there was the war, and I'm lucky enough not to have the war. And the thing is that, but in many people from my generation or around my age, is that there are many people that don't know how to use a computer, or they just feel this discomfort or distrust toward technology because they were taught that technology was bad, the technology was evil, the technology was a waste of time. So what we have to do is just not to give this impression. Is say that this is a technology, it's here to stay, let's learn how to use properly. Because if we learn how to use properly, we can also ask policymakers to make better regulation, and we can also suggest the companies what we really want, and not just for them to impose them what they want from us.
Exactly. So speaking about policy stakeholders, regulators. Let's wrap up with a last question on this. What are the interventions at the policy level you are foreseeing? And Nete is asking, are there any ideas you have heard regarding how this new form of disinformation can be addressed at the policy level? And I would like to add, does the current regulation, DSA, AI Act, etc., work here in this new environment?
So the thing is that I have some notes because I expected like some question like that. I want to be precise. So the thing is that, as I said before, the DSA and the AI Act are perfectly suited just to for the risk management, but the AI companion just falls into a gray area that probably has to be studied before being regulated, but we need just to start. So for the first thing is that the current frameworks is built around like content harm, algorithm amplification, and privacy harm. And AI companions create relational harm. And neither the DSA or the AI Act were designed around this category because it didn't exist. And so this is the first thing. The one thing I want to repeat is that the regulatory focus should not be on monitoring private conversation because it's not compatible with the fundamental rights and will be impossible to do. We should instead focus, for me, we should instead focus on the design incentive embedded in this system. So it means just requiring transparency and independent auditing and in how this companion system works. So we need transparency on to know how they are trained and what behavioral signs they are optimized for, and whether they systematically privilege affirmation over epistemic challenge. And one other thing is that, because I saw there was a question about youth protection. So the AI Act addresses vulnerable users, but of course does not focus on companionship systems. So we should also include like those vulnerable people, minors or youth into this risk classification. So basically, I mean, the other things are too into the deep. And for this thing, I mean, I want to finish about one thing, because one of the first instincts would be to prohibit the AI companions. And this is not my intention. So it's because prohibition it never worked. And prohibition will just have the only effect that a prohibition will have is just to remove control from Europe about these tools, because these tools will be developed by somebody else outside Europe, and we won't have the power to try to control the system. And the other thing is that control will just always fall in what I said before. It will just label this kind of technology as evil and as bad when it is not. And that will open up even more like room for disinformation or for manipulation of the information ecosystem.
So let's wrap up with this reflection, Massimo. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. I'm so sorry for leaving so many questions unanswered. But yeah, thank you for these exciting discussions and for addressing so many questions. Before wrapping up, a quick reminder that the session will be available probably tomorrow on our YouTube channel. And as usual, we'd love to hear your opinion on the session today. Please fill in a rating survey after the webinar ends. And last but not least, we will host more webinars this and next month. In 3 weeks from now, on the 26th, we will have another session on AI, but it will be focused on policy and legislation, AI-generated content, and DSA enforcement, who is accountable, with Marco Bassini from the Tilburg University. On the 2nd of April, we will host a webinar on the EDRN pilot story focused on how civil society can defend itself with Ines Narciso and Tanner Wagner from the Cyber Peace Institute. And I'm happy to announce that we are launching a new series dedicated to evidence and enforcement. The aim is to shift the focus from rules to results and explore how evidence gathered by researchers and civil society fits into enforcement action. We will host the first one of this series next Tuesday, the 10th of March, with Laureline Lemoyne from AWO, with the title Unfolding the European Commission's First Decision Against X. And the second one will take place on the 9th of April and will be focused on civil society evidence under the DSA lessons from AI forensics with Mark Fadul. I highly encourage our audience to follow the next sessions. You will not be disappointed. And with that, we wrap up our webinar today. Thank you again, our speaker, Massimo Flore, and also Ana Romero, our support in the background. Thank you for making this possible. And thank you to everyone who attended. Have a nice rest of the day and hope to see you very soon.